Professor Krelix adjusted his 7 eyes to their most intimidating configuration and surveyed his classroom with the kind of pompous satisfaction that only comes from decades of academic tenure and an ego the size of a small moon. The Galactic University's most prestigious xenobiology amphitheater was packed today, filled with the galaxy's brightest young minds from 17 different species, all chattering nervously in languages that sounded like everything from crystalline wind chimes to malfunctioning garbage disposals. "Students," Krelix announced, his voice carrying that particular blend of condescension and theatrical flair that made him both the most awarded and most despised professor in the university. "Today marks a historic occasion. For the first time in our institution's 12,000-year history, we are hosting a representative from the most dangerous species ever discovered." A ripple of excited terror swept through the amphitheater. In the front row, a delicate creature that looked like a cross between a hummingbird and a nervous breakdown began hyperventilating into a paper bag. 3 rows back, something that resembled a sentient boulder cracked its knuckles with sounds like small avalanches. "Humans," Krelix continued, savoring the word like a fine wine that might also be poison, "are the apex predators of apex predators. They conquered their planet not through superior technology, not through psychic abilities, not even through reasonable evolutionary advantages. No. They did it through sheer bloody-minded stubbornness and an inexplicable fondness for befriending the very creatures that should, by all logic, eat them." Ambassador Thorne stood quietly in the corner, looking like she'd rather be literally anywhere else in the galaxy. She was a middle-aged human woman with a kind of tired expression that comes from spending your career explaining why your species isn't actually a collection of bloodthirsty maniacs to aliens who've clearly been watching too much human entertainment media. She'd tried to correct the professor's more colorful interpretations during their planning meetings, but Krelix had dismissed her objections with the academic equivalent of patting her on the head and telling her the grown-ups were talking. "The humans," Krelix proclaimed, warming to his subject, "have formed hunting partnerships with creatures so deadly, so perfectly evolved for destruction, that entire ecosystems tremble at their approach. These beasts have been homed by millions of years of evolution into living weapons, and somehow, impossibly, humans have convinced them to live in their homes and fight alongside them." Thorne opened her mouth to point out that most people just liked having pets, but Krelix was already deep into his performance mode, his tentacles waving dramatically as he painted a picture of Earth that sounded more like a post-apocalyptic nightmare than a pleasant blue-green world where most people worried about things like traffic jams and whether they'd remembered to DVR their favorite shows. "Today, class, you will witness something that has never been attempted in an academic setting. Our human ambassador has graciously agreed to demonstrate the hunting prowess of Earth's most fearsome predator. This creature, I am told, is so feared that even humans speak of it in hushed, reverent tones. They call it," he paused for dramatic effect, "the domestic cat." The gasps from the student body were audible across 17 different atmospheric compositions. Someone in the back row fainted, which created a sound like a deflating balloon filled with jello. Thorne rubbed her temples. She'd tried to explain that Mr. Whiskers was literally just her pet cat, a perfectly ordinary orange tabby who spent most of his time sleeping in sunbeams and occasionally knocking plants off her windowsill. But Krelix had latched onto some nature documentary footage about big cats and had somehow extrapolated that all cats were basically furry death machines. "The safety protocols are in place," Krelix announced, gesturing to what appeared to be a hastily constructed bunker made of the same material they used for spacecraft hulls. "Emergency teleportation is standing by. Medical teams are on alert, and for those of you with particularly sensitive constitutions, I suggest you move to the upper observation deck." Half the class immediately stampeded for the exits. "Now then," Krelix said, turning to Thorne with the kind of smile that suggested he was about to feed Christians to lions, if Christians were alien college students and lions were a completely ordinary house cat who liked belly rubs. "Shall we begin this historic demonstration?" Thorne looked at the pet carrier sitting innocently by her feet, from which came the occasional sound of what the aliens would probably interpret as menacing growls, but was actually just Mr. Whiskers complaining about being disturbed from his nap. She sighed deeply. "Sure, Professor. Let's make history." The remaining students huddled together like the galaxy's most diverse and terrified support group. In the front row, Zephyr, a bird-like creature whose feathers had turned the color of anxiety, was frantically taking notes with what appeared to be 17 different writing implements simultaneously. Her species, the Aviarians, were known for their meticulous record-keeping and their tendency to panic beautifully. "I've heard," whispered Zephyr, her voice like wind through crystal chimes, "that these Earth predators can see in complete darkness, move without making a sound, and have reflexes so fast they can catch projectiles mid-flight." Behind her, Gornaki, a crystalline rock creature who looked like someone had taught a boulder to attend university, scoffed with the confidence of someone whose species evolved on a planet where the weather included acid rain and the local wildlife consisted mainly of things that tried to eat rocks for breakfast. "Primitive carbon-based life forms," rumbled Gornik, his voice like an avalanche with a superiority complex. "My people have faced the stormworms of Granite 7. How dangerous could one small Earth creature possibly be?" From the middle section came a sound like a stressed balloon animal having an existential crisis. This was Squealy, whose species had evolved from something resembling anxious pudding and had the unfortunate habit of becoming more gelatinous when nervous. At this point, Squealy was approaching the consistency of nervous soup. "But what if it's true what they say?" Squealy burbled, literally vibrating with worry. "That humans choose their companions based on killing efficiency? That they keep these predators in their homes and feed them the remains of their enemies?" Professor Krelix preened at the terror he'd inspired. "Students, please, let's maintain some academic rigor here. The creature we're about to witness has been selectively bred by humans for maximum lethality. Consider the facts we've gathered from human entertainment media and historical records." Thorne coughed. "Actually, those were mostly movies and—" "Silence, please, Ambassador. I'm educating." Krelix waved a dismissive tentacle. "Now, class, observe the data. These creatures, designated as Felis catus in human taxonomy, possess retractable claws designed for maximum tissue damage. They have night vision that makes them virtually invisible in low light conditions. Their hearing is so acute they can detect the heartbeat of prey from considerable distances." "That's actually somewhat accurate," Thorne muttered, "but you're making it sound like—" "Furthermore," Krelix continued, completely ignoring her, "they possess a hunting technique so terrifying that humans have named it after the concept of playing with food. They will torment their prey for extended periods before delivering the killing blow, apparently for recreational purposes." Zephyr's 17 pens were now smoking from the speed of her note-taking. "Professor, did humans really name this behavior after recreational activities?" "Indeed. They call it playing, which in human culture indicates something done purely for enjoyment. Imagine, class, a predator so supremely confident in its abilities that it views the hunt not as a necessity for survival, but as entertainment." Gornek's crystalline structure had developed what might charitably be called stress fractures. They hunt for fun?" "Oh yes," Krelix said, practically glowing with academic satisfaction. "And perhaps most terrifying of all, these creatures have developed a form of psychological warfare. They emit a subsonic vibration that humans describe as purring. Our xenopsychology department believes this may be a form of hypnosis, used to pacify prey before the final strike." Squealy had achieved a consistency that could best be described as horrified gazpacho. "They hypnotize their victims?" Thorne tried one more time. "Look, purring is actually a sign of contentment. It means they're happy and—" "Happy to hunt, yes," Krelix nodded sagely. "The psychology of the apex predator is fascinating. They experience joy in the act of destruction." At this point, the classroom's safety systems had activated, filling the air with the gentle hum of force fields and the occasional announcement that emergency protocols were standing by. The remaining students had unconsciously arranged themselves in what could only be described as a "please don't eat me" formation. "Now, I must stress," Professor Krelix announced, "that what you are about to witness may challenge your fundamental understanding of predation, survival, and the terrifying adaptability of carbon-based life forms. The human ambassador assures me that this particular specimen is what they term friendly, which I can only assume means it has been trained not to immediately attack non-threatening targets." "That's not what—" Thorne began. "Please, Ambassador, we need to prepare the students mentally for what they're about to experience. Class, remember that evolution has spent millions of years perfecting this creature. Every aspect of its anatomy and behavior has been honed for one purpose: efficient killing." Zephyr raised a trembling wing. "Professor, will we be observing from a safe distance?" "The creature will be contained within a Class 7 containment field," Krelix assured them, gesturing to barriers that looked like they could stop a small spacecraft. "However, I must warn you, these predators are known for their intelligence and problem-solving abilities. They have been observed manipulating their environment and even their human companions to achieve their goals. You mean like opening doors and stuff? Thorn asked wearily. Exactly, Krelix exclaimed. Environmental manipulation for tactical advantage. Truly frightening. The professor moved to the center of the amphitheater, his 7 eyes gleaming with the kind of anticipation usually reserved for groundbreaking scientific discoveries or really good gossip. Students, faculty, honored colleagues watching via quantum relay, prepare yourselves. You are about to witness the first academic demonstration of Earth's most perfect predator. Ambassador Thorn, if you would do the honors. Thorn looked at the pet carrier, then at the assembled crowd of terrified aliens, then at Professor Krelix's expectant expression. She had a brief moment where she considered trying one more time to explain that Mr. Whiskers was literally just a cat who liked naps and tuna, but she realized it was probably too late for that. Right then, she said, reaching for the carrier's latch. Everyone ready to meet Mr. Whiskers. The silence in the amphitheater was the kind of absolute quiet usually reserved for religious ceremonies, or the moment before someone realizes they've made a terrible mistake. Every alien eye, optical sensor, and electromagnetic perception organ was focused on the innocuous pet carrier sitting in the center of the most sophisticated containment system the Galactic University could devise. Thorn clicked open the latch with the casual indifference of someone who'd done this about 1,000 times before. The sound echoed through the amphitheater like a gunshot in a library. Nothing happened. Thorn said, peering into the carrier. Mr. Whiskers? Come on out, buddy. More nothing happened, accompanied by the faint sound of what could charitably be described as annoyed cat grumbling. Professor Krelix leaned forward, his 7 eyes adjusting to maximum magnification. Is the predator refusing to emerge? He's probably just sleepy, Thorn explained, reaching into the carrier. He doesn't like being disturbed from his naps. The collective intake of breath from the alien students could have powered a small atmospheric processor. Zephyr's feathers had gone completely white with terror. Gornak had developed what appeared to be actual cracks in his crystalline structure, and Squealy had achieved a consistency that could best be described as panicked pudding. She's reaching into the containment vessel, whispered Zephyr in a voice like wind through broken glass, with her bare appendages. Humans truly are without fear, rumbled Gornak, his voice filled with the kind of respect usually reserved for natural disasters or tax auditors. There was a brief rustling sound from within the carrier, followed by what the aliens probably interpreted as a menacing growl, but was actually just Mr. Whiskers expressing his opinion about being woken up, which was largely negative and involved several cat swear words. And then, with all the dramatic timing of a deflating balloon, out walked the most anticlimactic creature in the known galaxy. Mr. Whiskers was, by any objective measure, exactly what you'd expect from a cat named Mr. Whiskers. He was orange, fluffy, slightly overweight from too many treats, and possessed the kind of regal indifference that suggested he considered the entire universe to be his personal staff. He emerged from the carrier, took one look at the assembled crowd of terrified aliens, and immediately sat down to begin washing his left paw with the dedication of a creature who had his priorities absolutely straight. The silence that followed was so complete it seemed to have its own gravitational field. Professor Krelix blinked all 7 eyes in sequence, a sure sign of mental processing overload. This is Earth's apex predator? Mr. Whiskers paused in his grooming to glance at the professor with the kind of look that suggested he found the question mildly insulting. Then he returned to his paw, apparently deciding that cleanliness was more important than alien academic discourse. Yep, said Thorn cheerfully. This is Mr. Whiskers. He's 8 years old, he likes tuna, and his favorite hobby is knocking things off high surfaces for no apparent reason. Zephyr's 17 pens had stopped moving entirely. It's so small. About 12 pounds, Thorn confirmed. 13 when he's been getting into the treats. Gornak's crystalline structure was making sounds like a glacier having second thoughts. But the legends speak of creatures of terrible power and supernatural hunting ability. Oh, he's a pretty good hunter, Thorn said. Last week he caught a dust bunny under the refrigerator, very proud of himself. Mr. Whiskers, having apparently decided that his paw was now at acceptable cleanliness standards, flopped onto his side in a patch of artificial sunlight and began purring. The sound filled the amphitheater like a small, contented engine. Squealy achieved a consistency that could best be described as bewildered gelatin. Is it malfunctioning? Nope, just happy, Thorn said. He likes warm spots. The purring continued. a steady rumble that seemed almost absurdly peaceful in a classroom that had been prepared for witnessing the galaxy's most fearsome predator. Mr. Whiskers stretched, yawned in a way that briefly revealed his teeth, then curled up into what was unmistakably a nap position. Professor Krellick stared at the sleeping cat with the expression of someone whose entire worldview was undergoing rapid and uncomfortable reconstruction. Ambassador, I think there may have been some miscommunication. This creature appears to be sleeping. Yeah, he does that a lot. Cats sleep like 16 hours a day. 16 hours of rest to prepare for 8 hours of hunting, Zephyr asked hopefully. 16 hours of rest to prepare for 8 hours of eating, napping, and occasionally staring at things that aren't there, Thorn corrected. Mr. Whiskers opened one green eye, looked directly at Professor Krellick's, slow-blinked in what any cat owner would recognize as a friendly greeting, then went back to sleep. The amphitheater remained silent, except for the gentle rumble of purring and the sound of several hundred alien worldrews quietly crumbling. Professor Krellick was the first to break the stunned silence, his academic instincts finally overriding his confusion. Class, observe carefully. What we're witnessing is clearly a masterful display of predatory psychology. Thorn blinked. I'm sorry, what now? Notice how the creature has immediately established dominance over the environment, Krells continued, warming to his subject like a conspiracy theorist who'd just found confirmation in a grocery list. It completely ignored our presence, demonstrating that it views us as beneath notice. This is classic alpha predator behavior. Mr. Whiskers chose this moment to roll over, exposing his fluffy belly to the artificial sunlight while his purring increased in volume. Zephyr's feathers rustled with nervous energy as she frantically resumed note-taking. Professor, the creature is emitting that subsonic frequency you mentioned. Is it attempting to hypnotize us? Undoubtedly. Krellick nodded sagely. Notice how the sound frequency induces a sense of calm and safety. Classic predator tactic. Lull the prey into complacency before the strike. Thorn rubbed her forehead. He's purring because he's content. It's not mind control. It's just happiness. Happiness derived from the anticipation of the hunt, Krellick interpreted. Fascinating. The creature experiences positive emotions when contemplating violence. That's not, Thorn began, but was interrupted by Mr. Whiskers suddenly opening his eyes and focusing intently on something in the corner of the room. To the humans in the audience, which was just Thorn, this was clearly a cat noticing a dust mote floating in the air. To the aliens, it was something far more sinister. By the 7 moons of Arcturus, breathed Gornak, his crystalline structure resonating with awe, it's detected something we can't perceive. Mr. Whiskers' head turned slightly, following the path of the invisible dust mote with the focused attention of a creature whose ancestors had been obligate carnivores. Look at that concentration, whispered Squealy, who had regained enough structural integrity to form words. It's tracking something in the quantum spectrum. Actually, he's probably just watching a bit of dust, Thorn said wearily. Dust, of course, Krellick exclaimed. Microscopic environmental analysis. The creature is sampling atmospheric particulates to determine the location and physical condition of potential prey. Brilliant evolutionary adaptation. Mr. Whiskers suddenly pounced, leaping a full 3 feet to swat at absolutely nothing visible to anyone present, then landed gracefully and immediately began grooming as if nothing had happened. The aliens collectively gasped. Zephyr dropped 14 of her 17 pens. Did you see that velocity? Gornak rumbled. The acceleration from rest to maximum speed was instantaneous. No other creature in the galaxy can achieve that kind of burst movement. And the precision, added Squealy. It targeted something we couldn't even see and struck with perfect accuracy. He missed, Thorn pointed out. He was trying to catch a dust mote and completely whiffed. Clearly a practice strike, Krellick interpreted. The creature is so supremely confident in its abilities that it engages in combat training exercises even in unfamiliar environments. Mr. Whiskers, having apparently decided that his grooming was once again insufficient, began the elaborate process of cleaning his entire body with the methodical dedication of someone following a very specific checklist. The grooming ritual, Zephyr observed, her voice filled with academic fascination and existential terror. Is this some form of meditation to focus its killing instincts? More likely a scent-masking technique, suggested Gornak, removing all traces of its own scent to become virtually undetectable to prey. Or he's just keeping himself clean because cats are fastidious, Thorn said, her voice taking on the tone of someone who had given up on rational discourse. Fastidious about eliminating evidence, Krellick nodded approvingly. No forensic traces left for investigators. These creatures truly are perfect predators. Mr. Whiskers finished his grooming session and rose to his feet with a stretch that involved extending his claws. The brief flash of sharp points caused several aliens in the back rows to faint outright. Retractable weaponry, Zephyr squeaked, hidden until needed. And observe the stretching technique, added Gornak. Clearly a form of combat preparation, ensuring maximum flexibility for battle maneuvers. It's just a stretch, Thorn said flatly. He was sleeping in an awkward position. Mr. Whiskers then did something that firmly cemented his reputation as the galaxy's most terrifying predator. He walked over to the edge of his containment area and began kneading the force field barrier with his paws, purring loudly. The amphitheater erupted in panicked whispers. "It's testing the containment system," someone shouted from the back. "The creature is analyzing the molecular structure of our most advanced defensive technology," Zephyr gasped. "Look at the systematic approach," Gornak observed with grudging respect. "Methodical pressure testing to identify weak points." "He's just kneading," Thorn said desperately. "It's a comfort behavior. He's pretending the force field is a soft blanket." "Psychological warfare," Kurlax breathed. "It's demonstrating that our most advanced defensive systems are no more significant to it than comfort items. The implications are staggering." Mr. Whiskers, satisfied with his kneading session, suddenly darted across the containment area in a burst of orange fur, skidded to a stop near his carrier, then immediately flopped down and began grooming again. The silence that followed could have been cut with a knife, served for dinner and still had enough left over for breakfast. "The speed," whispered Squealy. "It moved faster than our optical sensors could track." "And the deceleration control," added Gornak. "From maximum velocity to complete stop with no apparent effort." "That's just how cats run when they get the zoomies," Thorn said, her voice barely above a whisper of defeated resignation. "Zoomies," repeated Professor Krelix slowly. "A technical term for tactical movement exercises." "No, it's class," Krelix announced, his voice filled with the kind of awe usually reserved for religious experiences or really good parking spots. "We are witnessing something unprecedented in the annals of xenobiology. This creature has just demonstrated capabilities that challenge our fundamental understanding of physics, psychology, and combat theory." Mr. Whiskers yawned, showing his pink tongue and small white teeth, then curled up into a perfect circle and went back to sleep. "And now," Krelix continued reverently, "having demonstrated its superiority over our technology and our comprehension, it returns to its meditation state, conserving energy for future hunts." Thorn looked around the amphitheater full of terrified, awed aliens, then down at Mr. Whiskers, who was now snoring softly in his little cat circle. She opened her mouth to try one more explanation, then closed it again. Sometimes, she reflected, the universe had its own sense of humor. Professor Krelix cleared his throat with the authority of someone who had just witnessed the academic discovery of the century and wanted to make sure everyone knew it. "Ambassador Thorn, this has been most illuminating, but I believe our students would benefit from observing the creature's hunting methodology in action. Could you, perhaps, arrange a demonstration?" Thorn looked at Mr. Whiskers, who was still curled up in his perfect circle, snoring with the contentment of someone whose biggest worry was whether his next meal would be salmon or chicken-flavored. "A hunting demonstration?" "Indeed. Perhaps you could introduce some prey into the containment area, something appropriate for a predator of this caliber." "You want me to put a mouse in there with him?" Thorn asked, already knowing this was going to end badly. "A mouse?" Krelix's 7 eyes blinked in sequence. "Ambassador, surely you don't expect a creature of this sophistication to be satisfied with such mundane prey. What does this specimen typically hunt in its natural environment?" Thorn considered her options. She could explain that Mr. Whiskers' most challenging hunts usually involved stalking the automatic feeder or occasionally batting at a catnip mouse. But she had a feeling that wasn't going to satisfy anyone's academic curiosity. "Well," she said slowly, "there is one thing he absolutely can't resist hunting." The entire amphitheater leaned forward with anticipation that was probably visible from orbit. Thorn reached into her bag and pulled out a small device that looked disappointingly mundane for something that was about to become legendary in xenobiological circles. "This is a laser pointer." Zephyr's feathers rustled with confusion. "It appears to be some form of directed energy weapon." "In a way," Thorn agreed, figuring that technically wasn't wrong. "Mr. Whiskers finds the target completely irresistible. He's never failed to pursue it." "Fascinating," breathed Professor Krelix. "And what exactly does this target represent?" Thorn clicked the button, and a small red dot appeared on the floor of the containment area. The response was immediate and spectacular. Mr. Whiskers went from sleepy cat to apex predator in approximately 0.3 seconds. His eyes dilated to perfect black circles, his ears snapped forward, and every muscle in his body tensed as he locked onto the red dot with the kind of focus usually reserved for missile guidance systems or tax audits. "By all the binary stars in the Andromeda sector," whispered Gornek, "look at that transformation." The cat crouched low, his tail twitching with predatory excitement as he prepared to pounce. Every line of his body screamed focused lethality. "The creature has entered combat mode," observed Zephyr, her voice filled with scientific fascination and existential dread. "Notice the pupil dilation for enhanced visual processing, the forward ear orientation for acoustic tracking, and the lowered body posture for maximum spring tension." Thorn moved the dot slightly to the left. Mr. Whiskers followed the movement with his head, then his entire body, like a furry orange radar dish locked onto the most important signal in the universe. "It's tracking pure photons," Squealy burbled in amazement. "The creature can hunt light itself." "Actually, he's just following the," Thorn began, but was cut off as Mr. Whiskers suddenly launched himself at the dot with the kind of athletic grace that would make professional dancers weep with envy. He landed precisely where the dot had been, but of course, the dot was no longer there, having been moved during his flight time. Mr. Whiskers looked around in confusion for approximately half a second, before relocating his target and immediately preparing for another assault. The aliens were transfixed. "Observe the tactical adaptation," Professor Kralix announced in the tone of someone narrating the discovery of fire. "The creature immediately adjusted its strategy when the initial attack failed. This level of combat flexibility is unprecedented." Thorn moved the dot in a small circle. Mr. Whiskers followed, his head moving in perfect synchronization, like he was watching the world's most important tennis match. "It's predicting the target's movement pattern," Zephyr gasped. "The creature is processing trajectory calculations in real time." "And look at the patience," added Gornek. "Most predators would abandon pursuit after multiple failed attempts. This one persists with unwavering determination." Mr. Whiskers pounced again, this time executing what could charitably be described as a barrel roll, mid-slight, in an attempt to compensate for the dot's movement. He missed again, but landed on his feet with the dignity of someone who had totally meant to do that. "Did you see that aerial maneuver?" Squealy squeaked. "It defied 3 different laws of physics." "He just tumbled a bit during the jump," Thorn said weakly. "Tactical evasion roll," Kralix corrected firmly. "Clearly a defensive maneuver incorporated into the attack sequence." Thorn, figuring she was already committed to this madness, moved the dot up the wall of the containment area. Mr. Whiskers followed it with his eyes, calculating angles and distances with the focused intensity of a mathematician, solving for x where x equals the meaning of life. Then he jumped. What followed was a display of athletic prowess that would have been impressive for a creature twice his size and 4 times his weight. Mr. Whiskers launched himself vertically, twisted in midair to track the moving dot, landed briefly on a horizontal support beam, and immediately leaped again in pursuit of his glowing nemesis. The aliens watched in stunned silence as he bounced between walls, ceiling fixtures, and force field projectors like a furry orange pinball with a PhD in theoretical physics. "Impossible," breathed Gornek. "The creature is using 3-dimensional tactical movement in a null-gravity combat environment." "That's just wall jumping," Thorn protested. "Cats are good climbers." "It's manipulating gravitational fields," Squealy corrected. "No known creature can change direction that many times in midair without external assistance." Mr. Whiskers, having apparently decided that aerial assault wasn't working, suddenly stopped and sat down in the middle of the containment area. He stared directly at the red dot with an expression that somehow managed to convey both supreme confidence and mild annoyance. "What's it doing?" Zephyr whispered. "I think he's figuring out that the dot isn't actually prey," Thorn said hopefully. Mr. Whiskers' head suddenly snapped around to look directly at Thorn, his green eyes focusing on the laser pointer in her hand with the kind of intense realization that usually precedes either enlightenment or catastrophe. "Oh no," said Thorn. "It's identified the source," Professor Krellick said in a voice filled with academic rapture. "The creature has deduced that the prey is being controlled remotely." Mr. Whiskers stood up, walked calmly to the edge of the containment area closest to Thorn, and sat down. Then he looked her directly in the eyes and began to purr. "It's communicating with its handler," Zephyr observed. "Coordinating strategy." "You want me to keep playing?" Thorn translated. The creature is issuing tactical directives to its human partner, Krelix interpreted. We are witnessing interspecies military cooperation at its finest. Thorn looked at Mr. Whiskers, who slow blinked at her and tilted his head slightly in what any cat owner would recognize as the universal feline expression for, "Please continue the entertainment." "You know what?" she said, clicking off the laser pointer. "I think that's probably enough demonstration for one day." The effect on Mr. Whiskers was immediate. The dot vanished, and he looked around frantically, as if his entire purpose in life had suddenly been deleted from the universe. He meowed once, a sound that somehow conveyed both confusion and polite request. "The creature is requesting continuation of the exercise," Professor Krelix observed. "Even after demonstrating its superiority over our understanding of physics and combat theory, it wishes to continue training." Mr. Whiskers meowed again, more insistently this time. "Fine," Thorn sighed, and clicked the laser pointer back on. The red dot reappeared, and Mr. Whiskers immediately resumed his role as the galaxy's most feared hunter of photons, launching into another series of impossible aerial maneuvers that would be analyzed by xenobiologists for generations to come. "Remarkable," Professor Krelix murmured. "Absolutely remarkable." After another 15 minutes of watching Mr. Whiskers demonstrate what the aliens had decided were advanced quantum hunting techniques, Thorn finally managed to convince him that the red dot had been sufficiently defeated for one day. The laser pointer disappeared into her bag, and Mr. Whiskers, apparently satisfied with his victory over the forces of coherent light, found a new patch of artificial sunlight and settled down for what was clearly going to be a well-deserved nap. Professor Krelix stood before his class with the expression of someone who had just witnessed the academic equivalent of a religious revelation. "Students, what we have observed today will undoubtedly revolutionize our understanding of predatory evolution, interspecies cooperation, and the terrifying potential of carbon-based life forms." The alien students nodded in stunned agreement, most of them still frantically scribbling notes about tactical photon manipulation and gravity-defying combat maneuvers. "The implications are staggering," Krelix continued. "This creature has demonstrated abilities that our most advanced physics models suggest should be impossible. And yet, here we have witnessed a being that can hunt pure energy, manipulate gravitational fields, and coordinate complex strategies with its human partner." Thorn opened her mouth to point out that cats had been chasing laser pointers for decades, and it was literally just a cat being a cat. But she realized that ship had not only sailed, it had achieved faster-than-light travel and was probably halfway to another galaxy by now. "Furthermore," Professor Krelix announced, "we have observed the most sophisticated psychological warfare tactics in the known universe. This creature's ability to project an aura of harmless domesticity while possessing such devastating capabilities represents the pinnacle of evolutionary deception." Mr. Whiskers chose this moment to roll onto his back, stretch all 4 paws into the air, and begin purring loudly while batting at a dust mote that was drifting through his sunbeam. To anyone with functioning eyes and a basic understanding of cats, this was clearly a creature enjoying a pleasant afternoon nap. To the assembled xenobiologists, it was something far more sinister. "Even now," Krelix whispered reverently, "it continues the psychological manipulation. Observe how it projects an image of vulnerability and contentment, all while remaining ready for instant combat deployment." Zephyr's feathers had returned to their normal color, but her voice still held traces of awe. "Professor, how do humans manage to coexist with such perfectly evolved predators?" "An excellent question," Krelix nodded. "Ambassador Thorn, perhaps you could enlighten us about the selection and training process for these combat companions." Thorn looked at Mr. Whiskers, who had now achieved the kind of complete relaxation that suggested he had forgotten there was a universe beyond his sunbeam. "Well, I got him from a shelter when he was 8 weeks old. He was the one who fell asleep in my lap during the meet and greet." "Fascinating," Krelix breathed. "The creatures select their human partners based on tactical compatibility assessments." "Was a kitten who wanted cuddles," Thorn said weakly. "Clearly a bonding ritual designed to establish pack hierarchy and operational protocols," Squealy interpreted, having regained enough structural integrity to form complex sentences. Gornuk's crystalline structure resonated with what might have been respect. And humans willingly enter into these partnerships, knowing the creature's capabilities? "Most people just think cats are cute and good company," Thorn said, making one last desperate attempt at accuracy. "Remarkable psychological conditioning," Krelix nodded approvingly. "The creatures have trained an entire species to view them as cute rather than terrifying. The sophistication of this deception is beyond our current understanding of evolutionary psychology. Mr. Whiskers stirred in his sunbeam, opened one green eye to check that the universe was still functioning according to his specifications, then went back to sleep with a contented sigh that the aliens probably interpreted as a tactical status report. As the class period drew to a close, Professor Krelix moved to the center of the amphitheater with the bearing of someone about to deliver a lecture that would be quoted in textbooks for millennia. Students, what we have witnessed today represents a paradigm shift in our understanding of humanity's place in the galactic community. We now know that they have not only survived on their planet through their own formidable capabilities, but have also formed hunting partnerships with creatures that exist beyond our current understanding of biological possibility. The alien students nodded solemnly, already composing research papers about quantum feline dynamics and interspecies military cooperation. I hereby declare that next semester's advanced course will be dedicated entirely to studying what we shall call the Mr. Whiskers phenomenon, Krelix announced. We must understand these tactics if we are to properly appreciate the true extent of human strategic thinking. Thorn had given up entirely at this point and was just watching Mr. Whiskers sleep, wondering if she should feel guilty about accidentally establishing her species as the galaxy's most feared predator civilization through the simple act of bringing her cat to school. As the students filed out, chattering excitedly in 17 different languages about tactical sunbeam utilization and advanced purring frequency analysis, Professor Krelix approached Thorn with the expression of someone who had just discovered fire. Ambassador, I cannot thank you enough for this demonstration. The university will undoubtedly want to establish a permanent research program. Perhaps Mr. Whiskers would be willing to participate in future studies. Thorn looked at her cat, who had now achieved such a state of relaxed contentment that he was drooling slightly into his own fur. I'll ask him, but he's pretty particular about his schedule. Napping takes up a lot of his time. Of course, Krelix nodded sagely. Energy conservation between hunts. The tactical implications are obvious. As the amphitheater emptied and the containment systems powered down, Thorn gently coaxed Mr. Whiskers back into his carrier with the promise of treats and possibly some tuna when they got home. He cooperated with the lazy grace of someone whose day had been pleasantly eventful but was now ready to return to more serious matters, like sleeping on her favorite chair. Walking through the corridors of the Galactic University, Thorn reflected on the day's events. Somehow, through no fault of his own except being a perfectly normal cat, Mr. Whiskers had become the most legendary predator in academic history. Students would study his techniques, professors would write papers about his capabilities, and somewhere in the galaxy, military strategists were probably trying to figure out how to train their own soldiers in advanced laser pointer combat. She paused at the exit, looking back at the building where her species had just been elevated to mythical status through the simple act of cat ownership. You know what, Mr. Whiskers? She said to the carrier, which responded with a contented purr. I think Earth's reputation is probably safer this way. Behind them, in the now empty amphitheater, a small maintenance drone was already working to clean up the dust motes and scattered pens, completely unaware that it was sanitizing the site of what would go down in history as the most significant xenobiological demonstration ever recorded. And somewhere in the university's databases, a new course was already being scheduled. Advanced Human Warfare, the legendary Mr. Whiskers technique, prerequisites, quantum physics, advanced psychology, and a really good understanding of why you should never, ever visit Earth. Mr. Whiskers purred softly in his carrier, dreaming of sunbeams and perhaps some salmon, blissfully unaware that he had just become the most feared predator in the galaxy. Sometimes the universe really did have its own sense of humor.